Welcome to the Next Best Thing podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Cline-Thomas. I'm here to help you live a life that you design instead of choosing a life you think you have to settle for. Let these conversations be your guide. Is your nervous system a little jacked up? Just a little bit? Just a little bit? Muscle tension? Are your shoulders up at your ears? Anxiety, perhaps? Are you feeling overwhelmed more often? If so, guess what? You are absolutely not alone. We are taking in an onslaught of information. I feel like none of this is normal. And I feel like all of this is unsustainable. I'm going to use I right now. I have been feeling triggered. I feel like so much in my life, my dreams, my health as a woman, I feel like they're being threatened. I feel like I live in a country that is hell-bent on legislating the diminishing of my humanity. That is how I feel. So that's what I'm talking about in a little bit of a different way with my guest today, Lidia Bonilla. She's really special to me. I met her during the holidays at Luminary, and Luminary is a community that's been transformative in my transition, in my next best thing. And Lidia introduced me to the polyvagal theory. I am not a psychiatrist. She's done a lot of work in this space. She's going to explain it, but this is what I'm learning. If you are thrust into fight or flight mode or in a shutdown state, you physically, biologically cannot create a story of hope. Like there's no push through when it comes to your nervous system. Your nervous system always wins. And without hope, there is no progress. So I was thinking about this. My hypothesis is that our ability to withstand, our ability to proceed, our ability to even thrive in this season may lie in a better understanding of our nervous system. I know this is super nerdy, but just follow me here. We all get into moments where our nervous system is dysregulated. That's absolutely not the issue. That's called being a human, right? But if you stay in a state of dysregulation, then science has shown that it can cause health issues. It will cause health issues. Again, your nervous system always wins. Not your mind, but your nervous system always wins. And what I'm concerned with is that if we're thrust in this unsustainable place that we're in right now, if we're thrust into a state of dysregulation, it will make so many of us, especially those in marginalized communities, even more vulnerable, and we'll start operating in our most primal state, and that is in scarcity. We're already seeing it happen, right? And so have you ever thought that in this country, in America, that has more resources than anywhere else in the world, that our conversations are about who we need to take things away from because there's just not enough to go around? The premise of this is there is enough to go around. How can we not be in this state to act from our instincts, our primal instincts, and how can we create space for ourselves to thrive despite what's going on around us? And that starts on the inside. Lidia Bonilla helps her clients realize their liberation first within themselves and then within community. And that's what we're talking about today. She's going to show us how. All right, here's Lidia. Lidia, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. I think the timing is actually perfect to have this conversation. So before we dive into anything, just given where we are in this season, I have to ask, how are you for real? Like, how are you doing for real?
I'm really good. I'm grounded. I think what has really helped is not watching the news. I haven't really watched the news since the election.
Yeah, no, I get that. My news consumption is very different now that I'm not in the industry anymore. So, no, I get that. And it's that grounded nature that we really want to talk about now, because your introduction, you introducing me to the polyvagal theory. I've been Googling and listening to podcasts because I had never heard about it before. What is it and what did it connect for you?
Yes. So basically, the short of it is that the polyvagal theory is basically the science of safety, and safety, not in terms of like you and another person or something like that, but really your experience of safety, meaning that you're calm, you are feel ready to connect with someone else. You're feeling the sense of feeling confident. Safety could mean different things to different people, but in essence, it's in essence the place where you feel connected to yourself, and then you can connect with other people. It's basically the science of that through looking at the different states of the nervous system.
Mm-hmm. And understanding that, just so we can kind of make it a little bit practical and then we can break it down, but understanding that for yourself, what did that mean for you and how you kind of navigated the world?
Yes, it meant that I wasn't broken. It meant that I wasn't broken, that there were things that other people could do easily that I could not do easily, and vice versa. And I didn't understand why that was. And instead of trying to be something else or trying to override my system, I'm like, oh no, I just need to calm down, or it's, yeah, when you do new things, it's okay. It's, of course you're going to be nervous. Instead of trying to override that with positive talk or affirmations or all assortment of different things, I accept it. I accept it, um, and actually, what happens after a while is that it starts to lessen when you accept it.
Mm. That's, I think, again, I'm just starting to dive into this,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's completely fascinating. And why I think it's really important to talk about now is because, especially in terms of the idea of safety, I think that right now a lot of people are feeling less safe in this because of the state of the political environment, coupled with fires in LA. Like there's an onslaught of information just being coming at you fast. It just feels like life is coming at us fast and furious. And again, I'm not a therapist, but I would assume it would put people into a fight or flight or clenched fist kind of state. Is that what you're seeing? Is that what you're kind of seeing around here? And how would you kind of suggest we kind of start unpacking this of what people really need to recognize?
Yes. So yeah, people definitely are different, choosing different things. I have a friend who said it was. I think we were making plans for New Year's, and I was talking about something about politics or something. She was like, "Oh, I have no idea what's happening. I'm pretending like nothing is going on. Like, what new presidency? What new administration? What are you know?" And this is, she's like, she's a professor. This is not a person that's disconnected from the world. She's just like, I'm just pretending like it's not happening. I haven't checked with her lately to know what's going on. So there are people that are doing that. I'm sure there are people that are glued to the news to see, glued to what's happening, glued to social media. And there are people who are the other thing that I'm seeing more really is people who are kind of doing a voluntary checking out. Like I'm not going to allow my system to get my nervous system to react to everything that I'm hearing. Because the thing about also the experience of safety is that it's not coupled with reality.
Explain that.
So I'm in my home right now. There's absolutely nothing happening. The sun is shining through the windows. I feel great. I worked out this morning. I like my lip gloss. Um, things are fine. And if I turn on the news or if I watch or if I start to break down look at all of the, for example, all the executive orders that were signed
Mm-hmm.
yesterday alone that,
Mm-hmm.
okay, taking rights away from trans children and this and all that. I then go into it, I can then have an experience of, oh my God, things are happening. Life is crumbling. What's going to happen? I'm going into, a nervous system response call, like that's called flight or fight is basically. Polyvagal is based upon primarily three, but there's actually five different states. They call them blended states that are in the middle. And so all of that's I'm looking at on the screen, it's not actually happening to me. And though it may impact people that I know and groups of people, of friends that they're connected to those communities, it's actually not happening in this moment right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, like basically what a trauma response could be too. It's like you go back to a space, no matter if the thing happened yesterday or happened 20 years ago, you can come right back and feel like you're in danger, which in terms of reality, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And the space and cognitive modalities based upon cognitive behavior and like all that cannot access that.
And so I was in doing like listening to stuff. I was listening to Deb Dana, who was talking about how when you're in that state, you can't have a hopeful narrative if
Yes.
you're in the fight or flight state. Like it's just, you can't biologically have that narrative, which is why I wanted to have this discussion today. Is like, if we are constantly in the onslaught of that state, then like hope literally cannot exist within your body,
Yes.
and your actions will not follow what a hopeful narrative could generate. It will follow like the scarcity narrative that will just be fostered in your body. What does that look like for people? Like what, because where you say fight or flight and we're thinking about, being chased down the street or a subway attack, but fight or flight can be a lot of other things too. Like describe what that could look like, how that could manifest in a more of an everyday, not just an extreme context.
So, for example, an angry email, or an email from, your boss or like the experience of like, oh my God, I missed an email. The experience of somebody knocking on the door suddenly, or the experience of someone, you're walking and all of a sudden someone is like nearer than you thought. Like in that moment, you may go into like, I have to go to some sort of self-protection mechanism.
And for me, it was just this morning getting a nasty email. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. What I mean? Like, wait a minute. It had been a minute since I had gotten a nasty email, but I got a nasty email. And I was like, well, how am I going to respond to this? But it really, the initial trigger, like inside my body, it was like, ooh,
Yeah. And so what did that feel like for you?
Yeah, it just, I wanted to tell the person off. It was just, no, you're not going to come up here and say whatever you want to me. If you don't like it, just leave. Right. And so,
yeah, defense.
yes, the defense. It was
Mm-hmm.
totally defense. I softened it up in my email, but I did tell them that, these are the boundaries. And if the boundaries don't work for them, then I wish them well on their journey. They can go find another thing that can better serve them if they don't think what I'm offering is what they need.
Yes. And in doing that, did that change anything for you?
It just took a minute, though. It just took a minute to just be like, because I was in a state of my last job in journalism where you are in So I'll say, like, when I lived in Philadelphia, I was doing a lot of crime stories. So I was at crime scenes where there were blood and guts on the ground. There
Mm,
were, like sirens, families are coming to crime scenes. They're yelling and screaming. Your head has to be on a swivel because when people are in an inflamed, like, emotional state, they may turn to violence, right? Because their emotions are high. They're not thinking, they might not like that a camera is there. So you always had your head on a swivel and always just kind of assessing kind of the energy. So you create spidey senses for your safety. Speaking of safety, and journalism in general heightened my spidey senses to levels that are crazy, because we were always in, whether it was me and first starting in my career, going around shooting, writing, and editing everything myself, and being in a truck in the back country of Georgia by myself as a Black woman, right?
mhm,
To being in a big city and people are around and crazy people are around, and you know having
mhm,
blind spots and who's going to look over your back. So I was always in a constant state of safety, to the internal politics within newsrooms that you're having to navigate, and kind of like the BS that kind of comes with that. So it's always a constant state. So since I left, I one have recognized that I didn't even realize how crazy all of that was, because it was my normal. But I've also calmed down so much. So when I get these like things, I'm like, oh no, we don't go over there anymore. Or we don't do that anymore. I can recognize it as kind of an offense to more of my spirit than anything else. Not me personally. I don't take it personal, but I'm just like, ooh, I don't deal with this. I don't do that. If people try to rush me, and I'm like, I don't do breaking news anymore. You know what I mean? I am not going into that mode. And so I do have a hyper sensitivity now to that type of environment. And now choose not to work with people who act like that, or environments that produce that, because I was just like, that's just not how I can operate at my
mhm.
best. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an incredible example. Yeah, I just realized too that I didn't actually define what safety is.
Mm-hmm.
Safety is often used in terms of protecting yourself against something else. So, cops are supposed to make you feel safe or help you be safe. A weapon is supposed to do that. Some sort of protection against whatever outside factor there is. Safety, as it Steve Porges defines it, is really safety is is the absence of a threat and the presence of connection.
Mm-hmm.
So if in order for you to really truly access safety, it's like, oh, okay, this is a space where I can actually have a somewhat vulnerable conversation with someone. You can have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in defense, that's actually not safety.
Mm-hmm. And what I fear is that the desire is for us to be in that defense. Because what I fear, I don't know if there's data to support this, but what I fear is that when you get a collective in that defensive state, then you can control them, because
Oh, absolutely.
and because they're operating from like a primal survival instinct. And so that's void of strategy, that's void of joy, that's void of connection. It's just primal. And that we can't, like, advancement can't happen there, control can.
Yes, it's a very reactionary state. It's a very reactionary state. So you're going to access. It's like the few times that I'm thinking about one time where I was walking down the stairs, train stairs, and I was tripping, and I grabbed on to somebody in front of me. The person looked like, I was like, sorry,
Yeah.
but it doesn't make sense that I would grab onto something that's moving. I should have been
Mm-hmm.
grabbing to to the rail next to me. But in my mind, the first thing I could access was this person in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
So now, luckily, that person was grounded, or otherwise we would have both been tumbling down the stairs.
Yeah, right. And in that definition that you gave, the community piece, because that's how we got on this discussion, was me telling you that I'm going to launch the community and really thinking about the new year and why is it that we don't always do what we know is best for us, and really trying to make it a space where people don't passively listen to this podcast, but then act on it. And you said it was safety. And I was like, wait a minute. What do you mean it's safety? So talk about that community piece. Because again, when you're in fight or flight, sometimes that thrusts you into isolation. Why do we need community? What does community need to look like for us to feel safe?
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that, because so I'll just go a little bit into the different states to answer that question. So in polyvagal theory, the idea is that nervous system has different states. So the one that most people are familiar with is the experience of flight or flight. Now you said, oh, what happens if your reaction is to go into isolation, which is actually another state called dorsal. And that often happens. So dorsal is the experience of like feeling low, feeling like somber, feeling low energy, wanting to, Netflix and chill, kind of, what do they call it? Rot, bed rot.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yes, something like that. Yeah.
Something like that about bed rotting. That's really like someone just being in the dorsal state for a while. It's also the experience of grief. So it's not any one of the states of the nervous system are not bad in and of themselves. They are actually all neutral. It's just whether the state matches what you're trying to do. If you want to run a marathon, it's very difficult to do that if you're in the dorsal state. But all of these states are incredibly important. So what happens to a lot of people when you're in the flight or fight stage too long, which is also the experience of reacting to experience. Eventually, what happens is you get burnt out. There's an experience that people have dealt with where it's burnout, and that's basically where you're just in that state for way too long, or you're reacting way too long, and then what could happen is that you fall all the way down into dorsal. And when you don't proactively bring yourself down, if you've been in that state for too long, you'll go to that state and it could take a while for you to get out of it. For some people, it even may create the state of depression. Mm-hmm. What I've seen a lot on, for example, on Threads, a lot of people in LA are experiencing sleeplessness because that state of reacting. Am I going to have to literally take my go bag like right now and leave my house? That's a real state, literally a fight and response state that people have been in now for weeks. Now, I imagine being there for days, but now for weeks. And so now when it's time for the body to calm down, sleep is also a state of dorsal. Now you can't do that. Mm-hmm. So it's important to, if you're in that state, to be able to go, okay, I'm going to discharge the energy that I have to be able to get into another state. So flight or response, that's so there's a reactionary state where it's like, oh my God, I'm reacting to something. There's also the state of flight or fight could also be great in terms of, okay, I'm going to go run a marathon. I'm going to access some energy, in order to do something. Like if I were to do this podcast in the state of dorsal, it'd be like, no one would want to hear that.
Yeah.
So there's that. The state of the nervous system state of safety is actually called ventral, where it's a state of creativity, where you feel at ease, calm. It's like being in the presence of a good friend. You're at dinner and you're in the presence of a good friend. That's the ventral state. Ideally, to create community and to maintain community, you want to create a space where people can access that for themselves, that ventral state for themselves. Mm-hmm. And so it can be done a lot of different ways, but but definitely in creating community, I'd say the number one thing is agency, to give people agency and for them to go, okay, what is it that you need? What would make you feel, comfortable? What would make you feel at ease? And whatever the response is, you don't judge it. Just try to be able to accommodate it.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. So much of what you said, it just makes so much sense, because that's what I experienced in news, is just the learning more about this, kind of putting a pin in the whole idea that we're humans, right? We have lots of states. We're going to be in and out of different states at different times. The issue is that when you're in a prolonged period of the dysregulation, for an extended period of time, and you kind of get stuck there, that's when health issues come up. That's where the problem lies. And so that's what was happening to me, is that I was in a prolonged state. I had 7 years of like toxicity continuously. And then that's where it turned into post-traumatic stress. And then it turned into depression. And then, but nobody would have known it because I was super high functioning. But that's exactly what happened to me, where I was just like, I have got to get out of here. And so when I tell people, they're like, oh, you're courageous. I was like, no, I had no other option. People are like, I don't understand why, but it was because I was slipping and slipping and slipping, because I was just in this toxic state. But once I left, also a part of it is that once you regulate, that these symptoms go away. They can address themselves. And so once I was just removed myself from the environment that was unsafe for me, then everything got better. Like pretty quickly, even though I had a lot of, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what my life was going to look like, but just getting out of that state of not being safe, because that's what we were talking about at Luminary was, I jumped ship. It looks like from the outside, I jumped off of a cliff, but staying was so unsafe to me.
So one thing there is to say also about the different states is that one of them is generally your home away from home. So and people are wired differently. First, most people are not in that state of high creativity. It's sort of the state, if you've meditated for any more than like 5 minutes, is that feeling you feel afterwards. That is very difficult to like sustain unless you're like a monk and they studied the brains of monks and see how they can be in that state for a long time, because they literally meditate for hours on end. So there are people that either gravitate to one or the other, which is either, kind of it really is called sympathetic state, which is more high energy, or people that gravitate towards their home away from home is dorsal. So unsafety too is like if you are mismatched, you're somewhere where you're not supposed to be. So if, for example, my first job, I have a degree in finance, and my first job was was supporting a trading floor and futures and options. And I had multiple deadlines a day because I supported London and Brazil and I don't know, whatever other time zone it was. And I had to get everything done by a certain time. I totally crashed and burned after like 3 years at that role. I had to go into go into disability, and I went to doctor after doctor, specialist after specialist, and because I had all these symptoms, I felt like I was getting a stroke, and I would go to the emergency room, and they'd be like, "You're too young for a stroke," and I'm like, "I'm pretty certain I'm having a stroke. So get the EKG machine." They're like, "You're not having a stroke." No one explained to me anxiety attacks. So what I was experiencing was anxiety attacks. You would think, no, like medical professional explained that to me. And it wasn't until I went to a holistic doctor who was unfortunately since retired. He was amazing, Dr. Gakai. And he said, your job is killing you. So you can adapt to it or you're going to quit. And he put me on this whole, Chinese herb regimen, and I got better, and I didn't experience those symptoms again. But it really was that was a mismatch for me. I thought that that's what I wanted to be. I thought I wanted to be a trader and all that, and my system is not wired like that. I don't get a rush from like taking $1 billion risks every day.
Right.
And for someone else, that is the perfect role. And it's interesting that they literally would have the same characteristics. These are people that have no problem jumping out of planes, have no problem taking on all this risk, because that's how they're wired. So I think the unsafety or the experience of a like perpetual sense of unsafety is when people put themselves in positions where the environment is not set up for their nervous system, and also relationships too. If you're with someone and they're like, go, 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 let's do it, and they're like, you're so boring. You don't like to do anything but sit around and read. And you could take that personal, or you could be like, yeah, our nervous systems are not, what we need is just not in sync.
Mm-hmm. So how can we find what we need in this moment, especially if you feel like the exterior world is triggering to you in different ways? How do we create home within ourselves, I guess, using that term that you used? How do we do that?
It's a wonderful question. Ooh, it's a wonderful question. So I actually it brings me, I actually do a workshop around needs, and it's fascinating what we don't understand about needs, because sometimes we go so long without it, that we even have an inability to articulate what we need. We just know it's not here, but we can't actually articulate it. So I would say to first find the ability to articulate what it is. If you can't do that, then look at what it is and sort of create like an opposite chart of like, it's not this and it's not this, it's not this. So what is it?
Give us an example of what that chart can look like, just to make it practical for people if they want to do that at home.
So like, for example, if you're not getting what you need in your career, well, what is it that bothers you about your career?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I was in banking a long time. What I didn't like, that it was all about the bottom line. There was no sense of integrity with anything. I didn't like that I had to do things that didn't quote to me make sense, or didn't feel authentic to me. They had to do things, aka by a certain time. So those are 5 things right there. So what is that? So if it's not this, it's not that. So for example, it means, okay, I need to do work where I feel fulfilled, a sense of fulfillment. Okay, I need to do work where I'm expressing myself, creatively.
Mm-hmm.
Compliance work is the opposite of creativity. Well, it depends. Sometimes, like, you could get creative looking at, okay, because a client will want to do things, and it's like, you can't do that. But let's get creative on how you can still be in compliance, but, not break the law, or break some other statute or something. So going, okay, that means I need to be connected. So my work has to be connected to something else, to a higher source, not called, a board of directors, not called, Wall Street.
Right. So our last segment is called ACT UP, ACT. Those are my initials. We talk about how to go from where you are to where you want to be. And so if somebody, as we said earlier, if somebody is kind of in that fight or flight, and it's hard to have a hope narrative there, they have to really address kind of the state they're in before that narrative can come in. How can we address that state if you're just in where you're not feeling hopeful? You can't even get there. You can't access it right now. What do you do? Are there exercises? Are there practices to really kind of bring yourself down to where you can then access the joy and access the hope?
Yes, definitely. Well, I'll answer that question two ways. One is I do an exercise with clients where I take you called nervous system mapping, where I take you through the different states of your nervous system. That's one. Two is that first understand what is happening. So like if you could just take a beat and feel what is happening for a second, what does it look like for you to be in the flight or fight sympathetic state? Is it that you're breathing? Like for me, my breathing will be shallow. Like, so quick, quick, quick. I took voice lessons once, and she was like, do you realize you don't breathe? And that is a very common, that is particularly, Black people, people who marginalized folks, they're taking inhale, and then you just hold your breath. And you're walking around literally. She was like, you realize you don't breathe? I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, I do this all the time. And she gave me literally a breathing exercise to be able to like be in the world, to kind of shift that around. So that's one. So what is actually happening in the body? Are you getting tingly? Are you like, maybe your taste, your sense of smell? Like when someone is very, if you're like super, if you're scared, your sense of taste may change.
Wow.
Your sense of smell changes like an animal, like you start to, it's wow. Is it, you feel nervous in your stomach, like you're getting like something. So just to notice what that is. And if you start to notice like, okay, this is what it feels like to be in this state, and start to connect it to what is actually happening in the moment. Do you get in that state as soon as you interact with a certain person or a certain group, or when you have to do a certain task, or when you consume certain media? I've always found it interesting to connect that with people. I'm like, oof, no. And that's when people say, oh, the vibe is off.
Yes.
It's more like you're unable to co-regulate with that. It's something we didn't cover here, but that is another way to regulate your nervous system. That's actually the best way to regulate your system, is to co-regulate with other people, which is the importance of community. It's why we absolutely need each other. So notice what's happening. Look at what it is. And then, for example, and if you're in the sympathetic state, it means you have, and you're trying to do something. I look at it like this: like if I'm sewing something, and if I want to sew something, and I have to thread a needle, I cannot thread a needle I'm like this. So I have to calm myself down. Okay, I can do that with deep breathing. So you can do something called four breaths. Inhale for 4, exhale for 4, and you can do that for 4 sets. If it's a matter of calming down. Now, if you're too wired, too high, then it means you need to expend that energy. That means you need to actually do something. I always recommend people do something physical, dance. Also, like go for a run around the block. Do something to kind of expend that, and then see if see where you are. And yeah, and I mean, and just the opposite, if you're in the dorsal state of like, I really want to get going and I can't, you could access more energy by also doing something physical.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really great. And I do want you to talk about, just really quickly, that co-regulation and the community part, and explain that. I've watched some stuff about it, but I want you to explain
Yes.
it.
So the nervous system regulates 2 different ways. We self-regulate, and then we co-regulate. Human beings, most animals, are wired to co-regulate. Co-regulation means co-regulation means being in the presence of other beings. You could also be totally correlating with another animal, dogs, cats, a pet. It's something that brings it's when you're in a space of calmness. So that's why the state of the Surgeon General, when he wanted to declare loneliness as a state of emergency, and couldn't, but It is because if we are alone for too long, or the experience of being alone, we start to break down. Our nervous systems actually thrive connecting with one another. No, there's no way around it. You can't hack it. No, nothing you can find. It is how we're wired.
We are wired for community.
We are wired for community. Most animals are.
Mm-hmm.
Most animals don't go and live off on a mountain, somewhere. They thrive in packs.
When you say we break down if we don't have it, I mean, this is why like the pandemic was so devastating.
Yes.
What does that breakdown look like? Like, what have you seen with your clients?
Well, here's the thing that I think happens the first thing that happens is that you start to believe your thoughts. And you start to believe, like, if you start to believe your thoughts and you're going in the negative pattern, in a negative way, there's nothing to interrupt it. And you start to keep just like thinking and thinking and thinking, and then you start to spiral. I think that the pandemic, which I believe we're still dealing with the effects of now.
100%. We never addressed it.
We never addressed it. People didn't
Yeah.
grieve. There was no grieving. There was no, so much was lost, and we just moved on, which is just not healing. It doesn't work. And so what happens is that, after you're just thinking and thinking, and then you don't have the access to the things that that would help you interrupt that, which is a conversation. Just a conversation with somebody. And somebody, you could be in total like death spiral in your mind, but if someone says, "Oh my God, that's a great quote," that's enough to go, "Oh, what I'm thinking is actually not happening right now." Like, that's actually not happening. So when we no longer had that access to community that we had taken for granted, whatever groups you were involved in, going to church, going to the gym, even, that impacted people negatively. You could also co-regulate with people and not actually talk to them. It doesn't always need to be a conversation. It's just really actually the presence of people.
Mm-hmm.
Or other beings.
Yeah. And as you were saying, like the vibe of it, because it doesn't even have to be, it's just the energy of the space that you're in.
Right.
Wow. Well, that is a lot to kind of digest. And I hope people really start looking into it even more, because it's given me so much perspective on myself and some instincts that I had. And I think for me, the transition that I've made and the information that I've learned about myself is really, you talked about this, about it creates more self-acceptance and saying, this is how I am, not just trying to be another way that's supposed to be, but it's really given myself like a lot more compassion of like, no, this is just how you're wired.
Yeah, this is how I'm wired. It's one of the greatest things one of the best things I love working moment that I love working with clients is, particularly I work with people who are go and they're high energy and this and that. And all those people ever want is to calm down, because their whole life they were told to sit down, shut up, be quiet, you're too much. And though I'm not like that, and people go, "Lydia, you're so grounded and you're so calm." I'm like, I am out externally, but sometimes in my head, but I don't show that. I try to be elegant,
demure,
very. But in my head, I'm like, all different kinds of things. But there are people. A lot of the people I work with are that, and I'm like, you know what? Can I just tell you something? That's not going to change for you. And what do you mean? I just want to come. I said, it's not. You're wired like this. Now, the wiring, there's different reasons for that. I think a lot of it is also a trauma response. I think you see this in homes where there are multiple siblings, where they're all interacting with the same sort of trauma, and different children will come out differently, totally differently. And part of, I think, part of our how we end up, whether our home away from home is more sympathetic or more dorsal, is part of that response to our initial our initial response to our first environment, our first home, our first how our parents were caretakers, took care of us. And so it's like, you're not going to, that's not going to really change. You could change a little bit, but the idea that all of a sudden you're going to go from a high energy person to someone who's like a monk and is just, it's not likely. It's not happening. Stop trying. Let's see how we can actually empower what you have to really bring it to fruition. So you don't see yourself as a obstruction or a problem. How you're wired is not a problem. That's what I wish I had learned so much earlier, because I was so busy trying to be something else. I spent a lot of money trying to be somebody else.
Mm-hmm. And it was the freedom now, understanding that and just being in that groove of what comes naturally to you.
Yeah, it's freedom because I can access what already comes naturally to me in a way that I wasn't able to before, and I can grow it. I can add fertilizer to it. I can actually grow it instead of trying to push something up a hill. It's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot more work. Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, Lidia, if somebody wants to work with you, you've talked about working with clients. Tell us more about how people can keep in contact with you. How can we support you?
Sure. So you can go to my website, LidiaBonilla.com. You can also reach out to me on Instagram. Same thing, LidiaBonilla.dot, especially spelled out.com. And you can take it from there.
Who are you serving specifically? Who's your ideal client?
Yes. So my ideal client is basically anyone who is in a sense of frustration with their life, in terms of they've been doing something a certain way, they have produced some results, and they are probably now seeing that the results are not what they used to be, and are looking for some sort of state change. And like a state change, I don't mean in terms of what we talked about, but literally like, how do I make all this different? How can I really be who I really want to be, and be at home in my own body?
Love it. We will put all of that in the show description. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yes. And as you heard Lidia talk about, that we are wired to be in community, which is why I am launching the Next Best Thing community. That is our 2025 initiative to go from just listening to acting in community together. Again, the approach is inside out. We are working together from the inside out, and we are co-creating this thing together. I might be setting up the infrastructure, but I need you to co-create the safe space with. We are going to be having experts come to host workshops about different things. We're going to have accountability measurements in there. Again, sometimes it's just you need a little bit of help to kind of get started. That's what we're there to do. But more than anything, we're really there for fellowship, for you to meet new people, for you to make new friends, for you to expand your support system. Because I really believe that for us to withstand this season, we have to do it together. We just have to. And so I want to create a safe space where that can be done, and also have a good time doing it. So go ahead to the show description and get the link for the Next Best Thing community. Join the wait list, and you will be the first to know when enrollment begins. So excited to have you. Thanks for listening to The Next Best Thing with Andrea Cline-Thomas, a Mountain Court Media production. The music was written, recorded, and produced by Gavin Casey, also known as Dark Purple. Now, if you like what you heard, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and comment on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to share it with friends. I hope this episode helps you on your journey. See you next time.